Hey guys, I'm here today with Tim Swirzek. He's a local lender.
Hey, how you doing?
We're going to talk about how to buy rentals with a partner. It's a question I get a lot of who should be on the loan, how should we structure this when we're living with a partner or being married or anything along those lines. And Tim's just going to give a little background about how you can best utilize your time. You can also ask questions below here at any time. So if you've got a question, pop it up. Whatever you want to know. We're going to go over a few things. I'm going to ask Tim a few questions. And hopefully at the end of this, you'll be able to have a better understanding of how the lending process works when you're buying with a partner.
Cool. Yeah, so we get this, and Jordan and I have run into it with some shared clients, and so that's kind of why we started talking about this. But kind of what it comes to is when you're buying a property, or your parents bought their property, they probably weren't thinking about investing, right? They were buying their single family home, they're going to live in, raise the kids, the house you grew up in. And when they do that, it's natural to think, oh, well, we'll go on this together. A lot of times for ownership reasons, or it's really just tradition, right?
Sure.
Both legally and, well, now I'm not an attorney, right? But both legally and financing-wise, it's a bad idea to put two people on the loan if you can get the loan in one person's name. There are plenty of ways to protect yourself risk-wise and ownership-wise, and there's further protections by not putting both people on. So maybe that's a kind of precursor to the overall idea, but we can kind of get into some more specifics. You said you had some people asking you, right? What kind of questions do they have usually?
Just this week, for example, I've had people ask, well, should I put both my wife and I on the loan, or as business partners in a transaction where they're using conventional lending is, hey, who should be on the loan and who should be on the title? And maybe the title is a separate issue we'll get into later on here. But just for lending purposes now, questions I get commonly. And then a lot of times what is the bigger thing is the questions are great. When you get a question from someone that is thinking about these things and is thinking, who should I put on the loan, or how should I structure this? That's easier to deal with than just having the unknown of, well, we're just going to put both people on the loan because that's what we do, and that's what Tim talked about. So I've been trying to educate people this week about, hey, let's put the loan just in your name. Then later on we can put one in your partner's name and we can swap back and forth. Mm-hmm. But
that's exactly what you want to do.
Exactly.
I mean, if we want to cut to the chase, and just cut to the bottom line and not talk about the why, you just said it. That's what people need to do is put, with one exception. Okay, so often you might have someone who is dominant in a relationship, and they want to go on first, but that's not what you do. If you're looking at a business's decision, whoever has the least amount of income and still qualifies is the person that should go on every loan.
Really?
So it's not necessarily flipping back and forth unless there's a different reason, but business-wise, it should be the person with the least income that still qualifies. And if that person can buy 3 in a row, that's who should do it. And the reason is, what if you get that big deal, that great deal that comes across and it's incredible, but this lower income person wouldn't qualify, but you've been flip-flopping back and forth, or you wasted a bunch of debt to income ratio on the person with the big income, so now they have a worse debt to income ratio, right? So person with the big income has a worse debt to income because you just naturally put it in their name because they're the dominant person, they make the decisions, whatever it is, doesn't matter, I don't care the reason. Now all of a sudden the big deal comes across and they don't qualify anymore.
Sure.
Right? So you want to make sure it's the person with the lowest income. That's what's going to get you the most amount of properties and give you the most opportunities, really.
Okay.
I had a client just in my office about 2 weeks ago when Jordan and I really started talking about doing this video. He came in and he had an opportunity, and unfortunately he and his wife had made some of these mistakes, right? They were both on loans and we're correcting that now, but he had an opportunity to take a deal down that he couldn't do because of this. And part of the reason was he was too tight on debt to income to get this particular deal done. It was a good opportunity.
Yeah.
And the solution, not just because of that, but the solution would have been, he can do deals. He could do a deal with me right now. He just couldn't do that one deal,
Sure.
right? And so sometimes it's saving DTI, even if you have lots of income, for that really great deal, right? I mean, like Jordan, you might be able to go out and buy 2 more properties right now, but what if you get the awesome deal where it's a big one where you couldn't buy that without every ounce of DTI? So I think you want to conserve your DTI, if you will, or your liabilities.
Absolutely.
And so if I were going to give people out there a tip, above and beyond just putting loans, like, or I should say mortgages in people's names, because we're talking about like buying investment properties, and you're probably thinking to yourself, if you're watching this, I'll put as many mortgages in my name as I can, and then go to the other person, just like they talked about. But it's more than that. It's also auto loans. It's student loans.
Yeah,
I see people. So see people do the same thing. They co-sign in student loans not because they're forced to, but maybe because it's suggested to them. Like the person says, "Oh, you should probably just co-sign or whatever." You actually have to push back a little bit and say, "No, I'm not going to co-sign." On a student loan, it's very often that you get denied, right?
Sure.
But they'll let you co-sign. The more people that are on it, the better for the company,
better
right?
for the company.
So that happened. So I'll give you a good idea. Or a good example. My wife and I just recently bought a house, and we know that we're going to be trying to buy more rentals. So I'm very conscious of this, and I see people, get tripped up by this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So her vehicle went out. I remember I called you for a mechanic recommendation.
Sure,
Yeah. So it wasn't long ago. Our family van, broke down, and I said, "Honey, you can get a new vehicle on one condition: it can only go in your name." Now, do you think that when we went to the car dealer, they wanted it in both our name?
Oh, absolutely.
The answer is hell yeah. Yes, they did.
Yeah.
I said hell no, and they said okay. and they came up with 3 options for us, none of which involved me, right? So if you push back, they're obviously going to try to go a path of least resistance and everything else, but if you push back, you can do this. You can get student loans, you can get auto loans. When we bought our new house, we got a water softener. Guess whose name it went in? My wife's.
Yep.
Right? We get gutters. I paid for those in cash. But, but
Sure.
if we needed a loan, I guarantee you it would have went in my wife's name. Because my wife doesn't make enough income to buy any properties.
Mm-hmm.
She can get these little ones, but she's not going to get any properties. So why waste my debt to income on a water softener, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And I think it's important that Tim's talking about using their other debt to income on income producing properties, and maybe loading up his wife's name with stuff that's not making him income, so
Correct.
he can continue to buy more properties rather
Right.
than just getting pigeonholed of, hey, you've hit your 50% that will allow and you can't buy anything else. It's strategically planning to continue to buy more and more.
Yeah.
And we see people all the time that they go out and they buy their first house, they put it in both people's names, it doesn't make any income, and then, I want to go buy a rental now. So we've got our house out of the way, now we're going to buy a rental. Well, sorry, you bought that at 30-40% DTI. Now you can't buy a rental.
Correct. In that, so one of the things you should know about lenders' guidelines is a debt is considered whole against both parties. That's not the legal term, I'm lacking it right now. But basically, if Jordan and I went out and bought a property and it was a $2,000 payment, that counts $2,000 against me on my next purchase and $2,000 against him.
Yes.
So they don't split it 50-50 and go, oh, well, you got a partner, you got a co-signer, so we're only going to count $1,000 against you. No, because if Jordan doesn't pay his fair share, guess who's responsible for all of it?
Yeah,
right?
sure.
In leasing they call that jointly and severably liable, right? In a lease,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the same concept. I don't know if that's what it's called in lending, but it definitely hurts people. And so I have another couple same thing. I mean, this was what started me on the path, and then we saw this kind of pattern happening over and over again. But same thing, they're both pretty high income, but that means they also have a couple rental properties, one that they had originally bought and lived in. So it's not a big cash flower. It's worth it for them to keep. I support them keeping it from a
Sure.
business point of view, but it hurts DTI, right? They have nice cars,
Yep.
But the problem is you could have one nice cars and one in each name, or one in both of one person's name, whatever, but they have both in both names.
Yeah.
So I go in, right, and you got $200, $500, $600 payments. I don't remember the exact payments, but let's call them 600 because they probably are. You got $1,200 counting against each of them, rather than 1,200 against one or 600 against either, right? So you can kind of see how the math really can go against you, and it can be a big deal.
Yeah, and this is a big thing, not only for people who already own a home or are married or getting together, but even to keep in mind as you're working towards those things. Maybe you don't own anything right now. That's probably the best case scenario to get started and understand these things. But if you do, you can still fix it. Regardless of that, really think about the long-term implications of what you're doing. Yeah, I know you can afford the car for $300, but if you put it in your name, that's going to hurt your debt to income. If you put it in both of your names,
It doubly hurts
both
it.
of you.
It does doubly hurt it, by the way.
So exactly. So it at the same time, while little things might not seem like a big deal, I've seen a lot of people not qualify for loans because of simple little stuff of, it's in both people's names and we have a nice car, we have a nice student loan payment we have to make, and those little things can rack up after a while. It's worth talking to your partner and strategically putting this stuff together.
And if you're not married, very careful about putting loans in each other's names. I ran into that recently. I'm undoing people who are just dating long term, and now they're separating, and it's kind of like a divorce financially, right? Undoing their mortgage, and they had to just undo a car loan and a student loan. So this is definitely top of mind for me. They're not looking to invest at all, but I have no idea why 1 month before they decided to separate, he's co-signed on her student loan. That one blows my mind. Not to mention, I looked at their finances. She would have qualified. That was a sales job if you ask me. Like, I can't imagine she couldn't have got the car loan on her own, or the student loan on her own. So I don't know.
And I think the biggest question I always get is, how do I get more properties? And my question, my answer is always, your first option should always be conventional lending. Go to a bank. Somebody like Tim makes getting money really easy. Whereas if you have to go with the alternative options, hard money, private money, whatever else you're doing, that's really expensive. Tim might have an interest rate of 5% on some of his loans. If you have to get hard money, 14% is not uncommon. So if you can plan these things right, you cannot exhaust your conventional lending as quickly, and you can end up with a lot more properties on a long-term loan at a much better rate. Really just better terms altogether, easier to get done. They'll give you a lower down payment. For example, I think you had some good advice for people that were starting to buy their first home and were going to own or occupy small multifamily homes. Yeah. It's kind of a strategy to get.
Or are you talking about like 5% down? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, for each of them too, if they can.
Oh, sure. So I think so. You're talking about using the 5% down Freddie program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a way, if you want to accelerate, there's a way to manage your down payment. So, for example, what I mean is, the common wisdom out there is to go in and get an FHA loan, which is 3.5% down. Now you could do that in one person's name in both, and I think you probably know by watching this that we want you to put it in one person's name. But there's a smarter strategy, because if you do that, then your next loan, if you buy another duplex to live in, your minimum down payment's 15%. There's no way around that. There's no extra programs, right? So 3.5, then 15. Okay. But if you flip the loans, so you start with a conventional, they'll allow you 5% down on a duplex, or higher, duplex or fourplex, but only if the conventional loan's first. FHA will still allow you the 3.5% down, so now you're at, instead of 18.5%, you're at 8.5%. Yep. And so managing your debt to income, managing your down payment, these are all important things. And frankly, this is self-serving, but you should be meeting with a loan officer who's an investor and knows what they're doing, right? I work at a company where the majority of the people that we talk to on a daily basis are just average Joes going to buy a house. They want the American dream, right? They're not looking to build a portfolio. Sure. So those loan officers don't understand how hard it is to come up with the down payment and to grow a portfolio, and what the best strategies are.
Yeah, I'd say the number one issue people have with getting more rentals, if they're looking to build a rental portfolio, is how do I come up with a 20 or 25% down payment? And what he just described here, that's 8.5% to buy 2 properties. Yeah. So whereas you'd have to have 18.5% to buy 2 properties. And Correct. If you can do that in one person's name and then the other person's name,
you can double that up, and you could potentially get 4. Yeah, now it gets a little hairy once you start, depending on who's living in what property and how, there are some additional strategies that sometimes are needed. And you both have to make the income to qualify, right? Yeah.
But you need to live in the property. That's a big thing. These are owner-occupied loans.
Sure, yeah.
These are not act like you're going to live there and then don't go live there. You actually need to live in these properties for typically a year, correct?
Yeah, 1 year. Yeah.
So it might take you 4 years to get this done, but let's say 5 years of moving around a little bit and slight discomfort, and you end up with 10 to 15 or 16 unit rental portfolio that makes you a couple $1,000s a month, I'll deal with that for 5 years.
With very little down.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, with very little down.
And there's nothing precluding you from doing more. So I have had people that come to me with big money. I've got some people, they're moving from San Francisco Bay Area. They're coming with a decent amount of money. They could buy an investment property now. Matter of fact, we talked about that, and I said, why would you do that? You're planning on moving here. Let's have you move here first. Because I showed them the consequences of not doing my plan and doing theirs and how much less they would actually have. So I'm like, you can move here as long as you buy that conventional loan owner-occupied first. A day later, you can go buy another property, but the conventional loan does restrict you that has to be the only property you own when you close, right? So with that one restriction, there's a huge consequence to them, 15% consequence in down payment, well, 10%, I'm sorry,
Sure.
an extra 10% down consequence for buying the investment property first as opposed to their owner-occupied. So by just structuring it right and having someone convince you, hey, this is the right plan, we save them 10% down.
That's
you know?
awesome.
And then they can still go buy, so they'll be able to buy 2 properties in their first year here.
Yeah.
It's just the order they do it is important. And if you don't know that, why would you know that if you haven't talked to someone, you know?
Yeah. And Saya asked, what's a comfortable amount of investment to start? I'll let you answer.
So if it's an owner occupied, it's going to depend on the price of the first home. If you're just doing that FHA program, that's only 3.5% down. So a $200,000 house, you could get in technically with as little as $7,000, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to find a nice duplex for $200,000. Jordan could probably find some.
We sold one for $215 actually in a nice area of St. Paul.
Okay, so I mean it's possible, but that is on the low end. Couple things about this. That's if you have to go FHA. If you can go conventional, it's better. That conventional program is harder to qualify for, so I don't like to hype it up too much because some people just can't do it, and there's no need to wait for it if you don't qualify. But another thing is if you just simply want to get started and you have nothing, I can get you in for $1,000.
Yeah.
Now it's not a great loan. It's a loan through the state of Minnesota actually.
Yeah.
Down payment assistance. You've all heard of the first time home buyer loans. Well, you can buy a duplex with the first time home buyer loan. You cannot have a cosigner if you're getting a duplex and using down payment assistance.
Yeah.
Right. So you got to be able to just buy it. So there's some things, but that's a minimum $1,000 down payment. I wouldn't recommend that to someone unless they need it, but I also wouldn't recommend waiting 5 years saving up money if you can get one today that way. One of the big mistakes I see, and I wasn't planning on talking about this on the video, but I see people trying to save for a down payment, right?
Yeah.
And they can save, let's say you can save $5,000 a year. That's pretty good, I think. Maybe you can save 10. Let's go 10, right? So you take a $200,000 house. Do you know what the average appreciation in the Twin Cities is right now?
It's been 6 or 7% a year.
So let's just.
Couple of years.
So should we say 5?
Yeah.
I mean, just
on average, it's
right?
3% or so.
Okay, so if we think it's 5 to 7, let's just say it's going to be 5 over the next year on a $200,000 house, which I think we all agree is hard to find.
Yep.
Most of them are going to cost more than that. That means that house went up $10,000 in value.
Yeah.
You save $10,000, your payment's not any lower, right? So if you can buy right now and you can afford the payment, I want to be real clear there. But if you can buy right now and you can afford the payment, you should buy right now.
Yeah.
If buying now would put you in jeopardy, right? You don't have the means to support that monthly payment, then by all means you must wait. It's just a bad idea. But if we can get you in today and you can save a year, 2 years, 3 years of saving for nothing really, you really, it's very, very difficult for the average person to outpace the inflation on the home with savings.
Sure.
And even if you do, it's a minor amount, right? Even if you could save $10,000, or $20,000, imagine for most people what that would do to their lifestyle to have a $10,000 benefit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because 10 is eaten up by the appreciation.
And if we're just mainly talking about duplexes here too, and if they can save that extra $10,000 a year but reduce their living expense even by 50%, which is very easy to do with
in
a
a duplex, buying a duplex.
Yeah, exactly. So we're just not talking about normal homes here as much. We're talking about investment properties, 2 to 4. Let's say you can save $10,000 a year, then you can save 50% of your living expense each year. Maybe it's an extra $15,000 a year that you could save by just buying a duplex now. I know for me,
because you're living so cheap.
Yeah.
That's the reason, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Even if the duplex is $250,000 and the mortgage payments $1,400 or $1,500 at that rate,
Mhm.
but you pay $300 of that or $200 of that, and plus your bills, you might be paying $500 or $600 a month to live. I know that's cheaper than your rent right now. There's nowhere in the Twin Cities
Right.
that you're renting for $500 for a whole unit by yourself, and maybe you get a roommate too, so you're not even paying that.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, if you do this right, and you and since we're talking about partners here, if you and your partner are both bringing in a decent income and you're saving a lot more of it because you don't have to pay that house payment or that apartment rent, this is just going to compound over time. So
Yeah,
your
call it
next one-
snowballing, right? You're
Yeah.
snowballing your down payment because
Yeah.
it's just so easy to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So by the time you get to the second one, that 3.5% isn't too hard to come up with, or even if you just buy one, whatever you want to buy next, that next down payment is not as hard to come up with. I know that was the case for me. Is my first duplex I lived in it. I lived rent free. I was able to buy a sixplex less than a year later because I had no living expenses whatsoever.
Right.
You know.
Right. And the key was to get in the game in a safe environment. And
Yeah.
and I, like I said, I define safe as being able to afford it monthly. Though the one thing about down payments is it's a one-time thing, right? If you have to scrimp and save to get to that, fine. But if you have to scrimp and save to pay your payment every single month, that's dangerous.
Sure.
So as long as you can afford it monthly. To follow up and just make sure I got that question answered, the bottom line is you can get in with $1,000 if you need to. A number that would be nice would be about 10 grand, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that would be a nice number. But if 10 grand is going to save you much more than a couple months to save, then I would just go with 1,000 and get in.
Yeah.
Right. That's my general take because, we're coming up on the winter's going to be here before we know it, and
Hopefully not.
frankly, it should be a good time to buy some property. So if you're just kind of thinking and you have a couple months to save, it would be good to go in, do some planning, get some things figured out so that you're ready November, December, January to be looking when it's cold out. No one else is looking, right? You got very little competition. And then we got a little chance. Jordan's excellent at negotiating things like closing costs getting paid by the seller, stuff like that.
Sure.
And it's a lot easier to do in January than in June.
Yeah. All right, I think we lost everybody there for a second. Again, the goal is to make money, so you need to analyze it with the end in mind. Maybe you live in it and you save quite a bit of money to live there. If that's your only goal, that's fine too. I think it's a great idea for anybody to do a multifamily house hack. I know a guy that's been living in a fourplex for 25, 30 years, and he's reduced his living expense the entire time. And that he's just had that one, but I'm sure it's saved him just a boatload of money. If that's all you ever do, that's great. If you want to build a rental portfolio after that, use some of these other strategies we've talked about, but make sure that when you move out of this multifamily rental that it's going to make you money. And if you have any questions about that, reach out to me. If you're thinking about buying a small multifamily or just a house in general, talk to a lender way before you start. I think I talked to the lender 2 years before I bought my first duplex
Right.
because frankly, it was
Weren't
self-employed.
ready yet?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
couldn't
wasn't.
qualify.
I
Yeah.
couldn't qualify. I wasn't ready, and I wanted to know what I need to do to be able to qualify. And by touching base with somebody like Tim, and I'll leave his contact info here in the comments, but by doing that way in advance, you don't get to a point where you're ready to buy something and just can't pull the trigger.
Right.
You need to be fully pre-approved. You need to be. I mean, I know they underwrite people before we even get through the process of buying the home.
Right.
You don't want to wait until the last minute to talk to somebody and then end up in some of the situations down the road that we've talked about.
Yeah, so I'll take that just a little further. I just had someone recently, and this is common, but recently they were trying to get everything ready. So when I looked at it, they looked as good as possible, and I actually don't recommend that either. Show me where you're at right now,
Yeah.
because maybe I can get you there quicker, or show you it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right? Like I have these people that are like, oh, we paid off all this debt, and I'm like, oh, geez, well, I could have lowered your cost here, here, and here if you would have just had the debt, but used the money down or whatever, right? So the point is like, sometimes it's better to put the money down on the mortgage. Admittedly, that's not very frequent, but sometimes we have more flexibility in mortgage insurance and other factors if you put a little more down. Other times it's worth it to pay off debt. Other times you should have it for a safety net.
Yeah.
And please don't make that choice without talking to a lender.
Yeah.
Because unless you've done this before and done it many times, you probably would have a hard time determining even what the best options are, right? I mean, like, how would you know? I wouldn't know if I didn't do this every day.
Yeah,
Right,
I learn stuff all the time, and I'm not a lender, just disclosing. I'm not a lender, I'm just a realtor, but just by talking to people like Tim and working through these processes with clients, I've learned so much of what to tell people not to do, and usually it's don't do that, call somebody like him.
Right. It is almost always what we do, right? Like,
Yeah.
people always ask me, well, what's the first step? And it's really the same with everyone. It's to start with an application and a face-to-face meeting
Yeah.
to determine options and
Yeah.
to talk through this stuff. Because we say it, but everyone's situation's a little bit different, right? Because not only are your financials different, but what you want out of the end goal is different.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, I always wanted to buy a duplex, but I think I had credit in the mid fives, really had no open lines of credit whatsoever. I had to buy my first credit card. I gave the bank money to get a credit card. And now they'll give me quite a lot, but who was it 4 or 5 years ago even, I couldn't get anything. So by talking to somebody like him, the lender told me what to do, and I know Tim actually works with credit repair companies too to help get things straightened out for you. If it's something that he doesn't quite have the leeway to get done, he hooked me up with the credit repair company. They disputed a bunch of things on my account and were able to hook me up and get me
Get you going.
much more appealing for a lender.
Yeah. I've got all those tools, right? Because let's face it, I benefit if you benefit. So we've acquired good companies to work with that we can help you with whatever situation you're in. Something that's probably worth mentioning, talking about qualifying, I actually am doing a loan for someone with no credit score right now.
Really?
Now, if you have no credit score, you can't have any bad credit. So you can't have no credit score and a bunch of collections. This guy has nothing. We call it a ghost, right? It's like he doesn't exist, and he's older. I don't remember his age because I don't focus on that, but I know he's older than me by several years, like 10 or more.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like kind of nearing retirement age. Has he's got no credit whatsoever, and didn't file his taxes last year, and I'm still doing the loan for him. So if you think you don't qualify right now, you might be right, but you shouldn't make that decision. You should call me and let me tell you you don't, and here's what you need to do, right? Because there are things that people just aren't aware of. Like, you just don't know they exist, and we do. That's my job, is to know that. So
Awesome.
So reach out. The worst I can do is say, hey, we got to put a plan together,
Yeah, there's never a no. It's just a no, not right now. Here's what we need to do to get done in the future. And if you are, again, we did this today to talk about buying rentals with couples or partners or anything along those lines. If you are entering a partnership or you're getting married or anything along those lines where you're partnering up in some sort of way, don't just go pull the trigger and take whatever loan somebody's throwing at you. And think through it. Look at this video, talk to people like Tim, make sure you're doing the right thing. Because a lot of loan officers will just put you in the first loan they can get you in, and they don't understand getting you to the next level. So getting you the second or third or fourth rental, they'll get you into one home, and then you're kind of stuck and you need 25% down.
Or you have to refinance. I mean, let's face it, we have some clients, it's in their best interest to do this, but they're refinancing everything they got, all their loans, just so they can buy more properties. And then it will be worth it for them, but they could have saved all that money, right?
It's easier to not do that.
Yeah.
But thanks for listening today, guys. If you need anything from me, definitely reach out via Messenger here on Facebook, and I'll drop Tim's contact info in the comments here.
Yeah. Are there any questions you want to check it real quick before we?
I don't think we have any more.
All right.
Update it. Yep. And if you do want to drop questions in here, I can definitely tag Tim in here and he can answer them later on too.
Okay, cool.
All right.
Thanks, see ya.
Yeah, thank you.